This is the video I dreamed about making when I first started my channel back in March 2023, and finally, it is time to dive into dark academia. But before doing that, let's talk about this subgenre briefly, because it is fascinating how it grew from basically an aesthetic trend to something of an instant selling point of new book releases. I was trying to find some answers to the question, what appeals to readers in dark academia? I turned to ChatGPT and it gave some rather generic answers that could be true for other genres as well, not only dark academia, but there might be some merit in looking at them. Exploration of academic themes. A no-brainer that dark academia is about academia. Well, mostly, as you will see in some of the book recommendations, but this gives the stories the opportunity to explore themes like the consequences of knowledge, the pursuit of forbidden knowledge, and the moral dilemmas faced by people who possess this knowledge. It can appeal to people who are still studying, people who plan to study, or also people who left academics already, like myself. Atmospheric settings. This exploration of knowledge usually takes place in Gothic or historical settings, such as ancient libraries, ivy-colored university buildings, or secluded campuses. Classical literature, philosophy, and art are also heavily featured, further adding to the ambience. My addition here is that they often feature a sort of closed system, the society modeled in small in these academic settings. The characters are usually free of everyday struggles like paying the bills or thinking about what to cook, but they contemplate deeper societal issues. Philosophical discussions. It is almost like reading two books in one, when the characters engage in intellectual discourse about life and death, about ethics and existential questions related to the plot. Some often feature personal growth and decline, and this usually creates a dark, somber, and brooding ambience, which can be traced to the more aesthetic roots of dark academia. Focal points of moral ambiguity. Besides the philosophical side, dark academia really earns the dark adjective with exploring themes of ethically complex decisions, obsession, mental health, power dynamic, the consequences of unchecked ambition, and the critical examination of the traditional education system, especially how it perpetuates privilege and unfair distribution of power. These unique elements collectively contribute to the distinct appeal of dark academia books, setting them apart from other subgenres and appealing to readers who are specifically drawn to the academic, intellectual, and atmospheric aspects of the genre. I haven't heard people refer to it as the Big Five, but basically in every dark academia recommendation video, blog article, Instagram post, Fable post, most of these are included. The first one is the, some might say, genre-defining work of Donna Tartt, The Secret History. As I mentioned in my autumn TBR video, this book actually came out in the 1990s, so dark academia is not precisely a new phenomenon born out of TikTok trends, as some might assume. The quintessential dark academia book features a group of misfits and a classics professor at an elite New England college who explore a new way of thinking, slipping beyond the boundaries of morality and into the territory of obsession and sin. To reflect on the appealing aspects of dark academia, in The Secret History we have the exploration of academic themes as the students study classics and engage in deep philosophical discussions, particularly centered around the works of ancient Greek philosophers. The backdrop is a secluded and remote college, which evokes a sense of isolation, contributing to the dark academia atmosphere. Here, the moral ambiguity and obsession are the driving forces of the plot, and it delves deeper into the consequences of the group's actions and their justifications for it. There are a lot of discussions where If We Were Villains is compared to The Secret History. Most people recommend not reading them right after each other because they deal with very similar themes. However, If We Were Villains is set in an elite arts college with 7 young actors serving as the main characters who are deeply involved with Shakespearean plays. As Greek philosophy was a central point of philosophical discussions in The Secret History, here Shakespearean plays, characters, and character choices drive these discussions. Again, the conservatory acts as an insulation, confining the students into a bubble with rehearsals, performances, and intricate group dynamics that stem from this setting. If We Were Villains revolves around a murder mystery, and the moral dilemmas shine through as the characters spin lies, secrets, blurring the line between right and wrong to protect themselves. The book is praised as a compelling exploration of artistic passion, human ambition for excellence, and their consequences. The Secret History and If We Were Villains get mentioned together a lot due to their similarities, but R.F. Kuang took dark academia into a different direction with Babel, an arcane history. I checked, and in terms of publishing dates, it is actually the freshest addition to the Big Five. In Babel, we have an alternate reality 1830s England as the setting, with Oxford University's prestigious Royal Institute of Translation, Babel, being the main backdrop. The story is told from the perspective of a Cantonese boy who enrolls in Oxford and gets confronted with how translation magic is used for colonization by the British Empire. Different from the first two books I just mentioned, this story can be classified as fantasy or magical realism, as it features a magic system that is linked to translation and the power inequality it creates. As the blurb reads, "For Robin, Oxford is a utopia dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. But knowledge obeys power, and as a Chinese boy raised in Britain, he realizes serving Babel means betraying his motherland." Here, the focal point of dark academia is more on the critical examination of the system, with imperialism, the struggles against colonialism, and the connection between languages and identities being the main themes. Similarly to Babel, which turned to Oxford as the backdrop, Ninth House takes place at an existing college in an imagined dark fantasy setting, namely Yale. There are the exclusive secret societies at Yale, bringing in the mystery and paranormal aspect, and our main character Alex Stern is asked to join to monitor their activities and keep them in line. Like in Babel, in the Ninth House there is also the aspect of an outsider joining, as mentioned in the book Leo's The Ultimate Guide to Dark Academia video. Alex comes from a different background than most students at Yale, and this contrast is highlighted by how she forms an opinion on them. The book explores academic themes less, but delves more into themes related to power, privilege, and the influence of these societies in the academic institution, but also outside of it, as they are connected to the real world and the power dynamics found there. I would say it is more action-oriented and less introspective than The Secret Society and If We Were Villains, but discussions of ethics and the consequences of power still add depth to the narrative through Alex and her mentors, Darlington's discussions. Within the 5 books I listed here, it is definitely the Atlas 6 that is the most dividing among the readers. Some argue that it lacks depth and the pursuit of academic knowledge is next to zero in the book, and I have to agree on that one, compared to the other 4 at least. The Atlas 6 revolves around 6 gifted and chosen individuals that are selected to compete for 5 positions in the Alexandrian Society and become the guards of the society's vast knowledge. Unfortunately, the theme of ancient or lost knowledge is not featured very heavily in the plot, apart from the magicians conducting their own research on some topics. Similarly to the Ninth House and Babel, it also contains fantasy elements, with the plot mostly taking place in a Gothic mansion, where the chosen 6 magicians have 1 year to prepare for initiation. Rather than the in-depth discussions on the usual dark academia topics such as life and death, morality, or the power of knowledge, here the emphasis is much more on the interpersonal relationships and ambitions within the group, and how far they would go to secure that position against each other or in alliance with each other. In that sense, I would say they bear similarities to If We Were Villains. Outside of the Big 5, which I try to present with a bit of analysis regarding the dark academia aspects, I divided the other recommendations into categories of books featuring an academic setting with some elements of dark academia and dark academia adjacent books. These are mostly books I haven't read yet but did some research on it, so it might contain some inaccuracies. Please comment on them in case they do. I also plan to look at some new dark academia releases in a separate video, like A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid, which I cannot wait to pick up. The Whispering Dark was published in 2022, and it didn't gather much attention online. I only saw it in very few dark academia recommendations. It is a YA story, and the plot centers around a deaf girl, Delaney, who gets accepted to a prestigious university. But it is not just an ordinary school. At Godball University, the students learn supernatural abilities, for example, how to slip between parallel worlds. We follow Delaney as she struggles to fit in at her new school and meets a pretentious upperclassman named Colton Price. Based on the blurb, we can expect it to explore themes of identity and belonging, similarly to Ninth House, perhaps also uneven power dynamics based on magic. It is also a paranormal thriller story with a murder mystery where Delaney and Colton are forced to form an alliance to investigate the murder, so we might find some contemplations about mortality there too. As opposed to a fantasy setting like The Whispering Dark, These Violent Delights by Micah Nemerever puts obsession into the center of the plot, with a university backdrop in 1970s Pittsburgh. Here we have Paul and Julian as our main characters, who meet as university freshmen and are immediately drawn to each other. Described as The Secret History meets Call Me By Your Name, the story revolves around their obsessive intimacy, cruelty, and the unsettling depths of human desire, which is a very powerful line from the blurb, and one that caught my interest immediately. I can imagine if you enjoy The Secret History and If We Were Villains, or even The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi, which sounds very similar, just exploring an all-consuming female friendship and love, as opposed to a male one, you would also enjoy These Violent Delights by Micah Nemerever. I have no idea why I listed these books in this order, because A Deadly Education is very different from These Violent Delights, but next on the list we have another fantasy dark academia book. The main protagonist, Elle, is very similar to Alex Stern from Ninth House in my opinion. They both grapple with feeling like an outsider in an academic setting, with power and privilege being automatically granted to students who belong to influential communities or enclaves in A Deadly Education's case. We follow Elle in A Deadly Education, which is the first part of the Scholomance series, as she's trying to prepare for graduation, which at her magical school is just a survival of the fittest deadly competition, while also trying to contain her own very destructive powers. This situation makes for unique moral dilemmas, as she grapples with the questions of why would she deserve to live through graduation and not other outcasts, or she's debating joining those influential enclaves, but then she would join and reinforce the system of inequality. Out of the big five, I can see readers who enjoy the themes within Ninth House also liking A Deadly Education. I specifically wanted to include translated works on this recommendation list as well, as most of the well-known dark academia books are from English-speaking authors, so we need a bit more balance. Vita Nostra is a Ukrainian novel by a co-author couple, and the blurb opens with the bold claim of the book combining psychological suspense, enchantment, and terror that makes us consider human existence in a fresh and provocative way. It has an academic setting, as our main character Sasha is sent to study at the mysterious Institute of Special Technologies after a strange encounter with an unusual man during her holiday with her family. The story combines elements of fantasy and magical realism, blurring the lines between reality and supernatural to create an eerie ambience. Based on the reviews I could find, Vita Nostra is often cited as one of the weirdest books people read, and it explores the transformative power of education and the philosophical implications of the acquired knowledge, which sounds exactly like an ideal, unconventional dark academia read. 4x4 is another translated work, this time from a Spanish author, Sara Mesa. It is set in Vibranian College, a school where the wealthy keep their kids safe from the chaos erupting in the cities. It explores the relationship between the powerful and the powerless, but unlike Ninth House, it does it in a gothic dystopia horror setting and not within the fantasy genre. The book is written in a unique way, with the first part centering around the disappearance of one of the scholarship students, while the second half is a diary written by an imposter who has infiltrated the school as a substitute teacher. This way of storytelling highlights the eeriness of what's happening in the college that seems so removed from society. With around 240 pages, it is a slim but sinister novel centered around the structures of power and wealth. Right off the bat, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife gives away the murder mystery plot in the blurb. 6 friends, 1 college reunion, 1 unresolved murder, evoking the classics of the genre such as A Secret History or If We Were Villains. On the other hand, as opposed to the male protagonists of those works, here we have Jessica Miller, who plans to return to her elite university and dazzle everyone with the confident person she became after leaving campus 10 years ago when Heather's murder fractured everything. However, it seems like not everyone is ready to let go of what happened back then, and Jessica and her friends will be forced to confront the year's worth of secrets each of them would do anything to keep hidden. Obsession and ambition are the central themes of this thriller story, told in dual timelines, which should work in favor of keeping readers on their toes. In the reviews, a lot of people praise it as their favorite psychological suspense novel, but there are also some comments on the characters lacking emotional depth, so it seems to divide the readers. The next one on the list with an equally long title is This Is How We End Things, which is a very recent release from September 2023. Here we follow a group of graduate students who study the psychology of lying. That's an intriguing premise. The blurb reads, when one of them is discovered dead after an experiment, everything the group thought they knew about deception crumbles. The themes explored in this book are very reminiscent of If We Were Villains, with everything revolving around the art of lying, guarding secrets, and being lied to. Praised as a twisted, suspenseful story, also featuring a snowstorm when the students find themselves trapped on an abandoned campus with a local detective, This Is How We End Things is already making some waves among the fans of dark academia. The next book on the list turns to Oxford as well for the atmospheric dark academia setting, but does it within the contemporary and literary fiction genre and not in fantasy like Babel, for example. In the lessons we have Mark Winters, a charismatic and mysterious professor in Oxford who gathers an impressionable group of students around him. Glamorous Emanuela, who always has a new boyfriend, Franny and Simon, best friends and occasional lovers, musician Jez, whose calm exterior hides passionate depth, and James, already damaged by Oxford and looking for a group to belong to. But their charmed world of learning and parties and love affairs won't last long when tragedy strikes. Revolving around the group dynamics interwoven with ambition, desire, and betrayal, I saw this being compared to The Secret History a lot, also based on the similarities in the narrators, but just on this description alone, I could see a hint of the Atlas 6 in it too. And last, but certainly not least, we have to talk about Bunny when mentioning dark academia, especially the more unhinged kind. In Bunny, we see the plot happening through the eyes of Samantha, who is enrolled at a prestigious writing program as a scholarship student. She has to attend a workshop with a clique of fellow students she dubs bunnies because they are just so sweet and syrupy and they call each other Bunny all the time. And one day she receives an invitation to their after-school ritual that should help her tap into her potential, but things take a sinister turn very fast. Bunny blurs the lines masterfully between reality and surrealism, with female loneliness, desire to belong, and artistic processes being central themes. Given that Samantha is a scholarship student at an elite university, we get a bit of Ninth House-esque critique of the elite in a way that she looks at her fellow students. I would recommend Bunny to everyone who is looking for a dark academia read that approaches it in a more satirical and surrealistic way through a female main character's eyes. In the next section, I want to talk about books that can be categorized as dark academia, but not fully in my opinion. But if you have exhausted the more strictly dark academia list, they might fulfill that itch all the same. So what if you added witches, necromancers, and a blood feud to dark academia. You would get Malum Discordiae by Ashlyn Drevek that was published in 2022. It's apparently part of a series, with the second book being published this year, so it might be interesting for people who are craving a dark academia series. In the story, we follow necromancer Cassius Corbin as he enrolls at Tenebrose University and comes face to face with the son of his mother's killer, a naive weather witch. Based on the blurb, it features plenty of steam, a lot of snark, and a pile of bodies you would expect in a magical Romeo and Juliet retelling, except this one has a happy ending. The dark label here seems to refer more to the dangers within the university halls, I assume similarly to A Deadly Education. So if anyone is looking for an urban fantasy in an academic setting, featuring a gaming couple with some enemies to lovers dynamic, Malum Discordiae sounds like a good fit for that. Jumping from a relatively recent release to a classic, a lot of dark academia recommendation lists contain the picture of Dorian Gray as well, and I would like to make some arguments in favor of it. Does it revolve around an academic institution? No, but it still contains intellectual and philosophical discussions as it explores the pursuit of pleasure and the consequences of living a life devoid of moral restraint. Moral ambiguity is a central theme of the book, with questions of the nature of morality and the price of eternal youth being raised, prompting the readers to consider the consequences around the rejection of conventional morality. In that sense, the picture of Dorian Gray can be linked to The Secret History and many more dark academia reads, so if you are looking for a book that dives into these topics, but outside of an academic setting, you might consider picking up this classic. I'm low-key proud of this one, because no matter how many dark academia recommendation lists I've seen and read and watched, this one was never mentioned. Could be because it is a super polarizing read, and it was even banned in the author's home country, Denmark, for a while. I'm talking about Nothing by Jean Teller, which came out in 2000 and we read it in advanced literature class in 2014 in high school. You could say that the message was so impactful that I even remember it after almost 10 years. In Nothing, we have a 7th grade class as our main characters, and one day one of the students, Pierre Anton, declares that life has no meaning and therefore nothing is worth doing. He climbs up on a tree and he stays there. His classmates cannot make him come down, not even by throwing rocks at him. So to prove to Pierre Anton that life has meaning, the children decide to give up things of importance. The pile starts with the superficial, a fishing rod, a new pair of shoes, but as the sacrifices become more extreme, the students grow increasingly desperate to get Pierre Anton down to justify their belief in the meaningful things in life. I believe it can qualify for the label of dark academia, as it features an academic setting and looks at the theme of the meaning of life and nihilism through the eyes of 7th graders. Be warned though, the book qualifies for the horror genre too, so maybe look up some trigger warnings before diving into it. After a book that was one of the most impressive pieces of contemporary fiction I read in my younger years, comes a book I DNF'd back in the days, but I have been contemplating giving it a second chance. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro is a thought-provoking dystopian novel that shares thematic elements with dark academia. It is set in an English boarding school, exploring characters' intellectual and emotional development within the confines of the institution. It raises questions about the purpose of their education and their future roles in society, creating a sense of melancholy and foreboding. Philosophical questions of identity, ethics, and the value of life are raised as the characters come to terms with their predestined roles in society and they confront existential dilemmas. The novel explores moral ambiguity through its depiction of a society that sacrifices a group of individuals for the benefit of others. The characters face the moral consequence of their existence and the choices made by the society that controls them, leading to a sense of moral complexity. In that sense, I was reminded of 4x4 that I mentioned in the previous section. So if you are looking for a book that explores topics of identity and meaning of existence, but in a dystopian setting, and you haven't picked up Never Let Me Go, you should consider doing so. That rhymed unintentionally. Another well-known book that can be considered dark academia adjacent is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. We have an academic setting, but only in the retrospective timeline, as the plot follows through brilliant and ambitious college students, Victor and Eli, who embark on a dangerous experiment to gain supernatural abilities. As you could have guessed by this summary, the pursuit of knowledge and power is central to the story. The novel engages in philosophical discussions about the nature of good and evil, the concept of heroes and villains, and the moral complexities of using supernatural powers. Victor and Eli's conflicting worldviews and ethical dilemmas add depth to the narrative, reminiscent of dark academia. If you are looking for a book that combines elements of dark fantasy and superhero fiction, while also incorporating themes of intellectual pursuit, the pursuit of power, and moral ambiguity, elements commonly associated with dark academia, look no further than Vicious by V.E. Schwab and the second part of the series, Vengeful. As the 20th Dark Academia book recommendations, I am bringing you Modern Divination. This book is a bit of a mystery to me. It made some waves in the fantasy romance community, but for some reason it is incredibly hard to get my hands on a physical copy here in Austria, even after like 9 months after it came out. I think it's because it was independently published actually. In Modern Divination, as you could have guessed from the title, we have 23-year-old Aurelia Schwarz as our main character, who lives a double life, a human one and a magical one. But her gift of green magic has begun to fade, and after a run-in with a power-hungry witch, she is forced into hiding among a family of witches. What's the catch? She is also cast into an unexpected alliance with her dreadfully arrogant classmate, who is, based on the Goodreads reviews, a certified Hull-coded love interest. Say no more, I'm already super interested. It seems here the dark academia part gets less weight, but it features an academic settings, some academic rivals to lovers, and some witchy dangers in an urban fantasy setting, which sounds like a really good recipe for a dark academia adjacent autumn book, if you ask me. We just explored 20 dark academia books regarding their setting and central themes. I hope you could find a few that are new to you and you would like to add them to your TBR. Let me know which ones are those in the comments below. I'm still planning a dark academia reading vlog, but my time is now a bit limited with taking German classes, so let's see. Anyway, this video is already too long, so see you in the next one. Take care!